process of change over time is a great way to understand that history is a process of change, but also continuity. The one guarantee about change is that it's always constant. So normally we talk about change over time, and we learn about change over time in terms of people and their lives and their experiences. But today we're going to learn about how change over time is also very visible in the natural features of our park as well. This is our first example of change over time. From far away, this looks like any old cedar tree. And the cedar tree is a conifer. That means it has needle-like scales for leaves and bears cones. And this particular tree is actually also a certified champion by Wake County's Capital Trees program. But we're going to take a little bit of a closer look to this tree. If you look a little bit closer, you can see that at one point there was something here that looks like a water spigot. This was probably placed near the tree a number of years ago. Over time, as the tree grew, the wood surrounded the spigot, placing a tight grip on it. Now, as this tree continues growing upwards and outwards, it's surrounding this water spigot. There is a hard to pronounce scientific term for this phenomenon, edaphoecotropism. In easier to understand language, it's the bioadaptive process of living tissue to engulf foreign objects like rocks, road signs, even water spouts. There's also lots of instances of people finding horseshoes inside trees after they cut them down. Despite what you might think, this act of incorporation does not harm the trees. In fact, it often benefits them by adding strength to their structure. Rather than ceasing to grow, the tree adapts to the unfavorable condition by incorporating it into its growth cycle. This cedar tree and this water spigot end up being an example of growth, adaptation, and self-repair. Now we are on a section of the Honeycut Trail, and the Honeycut Trail is a crushed gravel trail that's 0.4 miles long. You can find the entrance to this trail at the edge of our parking lot near the large boulder and the picnic table. Now the name Honeycut comes from a part of Oakview's history. In the late 1880s, Job P. Wyatt purchased Oakview, but we know that he did not live here. So we also know from around that same time period, there was a barn on the farm referred to as the Honeycut Barn. We also know that in 1894, Job Wyatt held a mortgage against a man named Artemus Honeycut. So what we think is that since Job Wyatt didn't live here, he would have had to have hired a farm manager, and his relationship with Artemus Honeycut indicates that it's possible Artemus Honeycut was the farm manager who was overseeing the system of farm laborers and tenant farmers working Oakview's land during that time period. So that's where that name comes from. We also have another really great example of how you can notice change over time in our trees here at Oakview. Right here, you can see that there's this old fence here, and you can see that a couple points along this fence, the tree is actually growing around the fence, kind of similar to what we saw in the other tree with it growing around that water spout. We see the same thing here with this fence. So this is a great example of another change over time in our trees and how you can track those changes over time, because this fence is also a part of Oakview's history. This natural forest area is actually relatively young. It's only really been around since Oakview was a park. So when Oakview wasn't operating, when it was a functional farm, this whole area was actually just pasture, so it was probably used for grazing animals or growing crops. And so that's what this fence is probably left over from that time when it was a pasture. But it's stayed here, it's remained a part of our history and a part of our land. And as the forest grew up around this area, once the natural part started taking over a little bit more, we can see right here the relationship between the historical, the built environment, and the natural environment. So I hope you enjoyed following along with us today. The next time you're at Oakview, I encourage you to look really closely around the environment, not just the buildings and the structures, but also the natural features of our park, because there are a lot of opportunities to notice change over time in both the built and the natural environment, And it's always a good reminder that we should look very closely and think really deeply about the relationship between our historical, our history, our cultural, and then also our natural environment as well, and how they're one and the same and grow off of each other as well. So thank you so much for following along. I hope you enjoyed our video, and let us know if you have any questions.